Hey, welcome to Ditch Digger CEO. We've got actually Ditch Digger CEO and my buddy's podcast at the same time, going at the same time.
That's right. We're doing two co-podcasts in a row where they're Durand on Demand and Ditch Digger CEO.
Durand on Demand.
So far, Gary's a better host than me, by the way.
Well, no, you know what? Let's look at the ratings. I'm not sure where our ratings at. Are they still pretty good, Chris? Even though we're nothing compared to this production. Chris has been asking me to do this. But I think our ratings are pretty good still, right? Okay, they're still pretty good.
That's great.
We'll have to compare and see where we're at compared to these guys. But there's definitely more listeners because he does a way better job promoting this. But hey, we've got an amazing guy we're going to hammer on today. A buddy of mine that I've been wanting to get on, Ditch Digger CEO, since I met him. This young man is an amazing, he's a titan of business in my opinion. And I'm blessed to call him my friend. And I get to introduce him to my other friend here, Dave Durand. So welcome, Peter. Peter Griscom, welcome to Ditch Digger CEO and
Durand on Demand. And by the way, Peter, just so you know, I have wanted you on the show ever since I heard about you.
I appreciate that, and thank you for having me. I'm excited to get to chat with one of my favorite people, Gary, and obviously someone I'm sure is going to be a new favorite person in you. So this is exciting.
But the pressure to say that, Peter, was too great. I know, with Gary sitting right here. We all get it.
So Peter, as you know, right, what we like to do is just like kind of we want you know, America across America and across this great world we're in. We want people to understand that in America, you can go after your American dream and attain it. If you work hard, you have a passion. You're always learning, right? You got a little help from the guy above us, right? If you got all these things in a great family, success can be imminent. And I believe in America better than anywhere else. Even if we're all by ourselves, we can acquire great things in this world and in America. So I like to just kind of go through your story. Dave will hammer you with some questions and ask you some questions. So he's better than I am. And then I'll try to be a little more quiet than normal because Chris will get mad at me if I take too much time. So love to just talk about you really and kind of where it all started. Where you ended up to think that you could be an entrepreneur someday as a young kid that you were when you started, and kind of how it all happened. So I'd love to talk a little bit about family, faith, startup of your business, where it's gone to, your multi businesses, where they've gone to today, and where they're going to go to in the coming years.
Yeah, I mean it's a great question. I consider myself really blessed with how I grew up, with who my parents were as people and their character, but also the example that I had throughout my family on both my mom's side with my grandfather and on my dad's side as well, in this idea that if you can think up something, you can envision it, and you work hard, then you can build a future for yourself. And not just for yourself, but for generations of your family. So I consider myself very fortunate. I grew up in a really strong Christian household. I can't say I was the most well-behaved, teenager into college, but I was, I had very, very strong Christian parents. But most importantly, when I talk about my business, my grandfather was a really influential person for me and started a business, a number of different businesses, but his business that was successful had gone public. And because of that example and because of how he was able to be so generous, which was a main driver for me, that was always something in the back of my mind that I thought I might want to start a business. Now, when I was around 16 years old, an athlete, all I wanted to do was be a better athlete. So I naturally gravitated towards health, towards dietary supplements. I got my first job in a GNC. And so I always knew I liked this. And I still remember my dad telling him I wanted to do something like that, maybe own a GNC or maybe be a personal trainer, right? Like as you think when you're 16, 17 years old. And he sat me down and explained to me, what that was going to look like and encouraged me to think bigger. And so as I went to college and was trying to run track, like I said, I wanted to be an athlete. That's what I wanted to do. I wanted to go to the Olympics. I very quickly realized that while God had blessed me with a lot of things, I was not as genetically gifted, and I could work as hard as I wanted, but I was just never quite going to get to that level. And I think anybody that knows me will tell you I hate wasting time. I don't like to spend time on unproductive things. And So I instantly decided, I'm not going to run track anymore. My joke is I got beat by a triple jumper in the 400, and I was fast in high school, but once that happened, I said, I'm not going to the Olympics. And so that began my entrepreneurial journey of saying, I love supplements and I wanted to get into that business. And that's where I went.
What year were you at Auburn then, when you decided?
I graduated high school in 2007. So I went to high school in the Atlanta area, which was a great school at the time, and just really enjoyed my time at Auburn. But unfortunately for me, I would tell you that, like I said, I went there to be an athlete and I didn't stick with it for very long.
Okay. So the first year, second year?
Yeah, exactly. Like you made it through that first year and then after that I was done.
All right. So now you're saying it's entrepreneurship. I'm going after this. So tell us how your brain worked then and what you discovered.
I was very self-assured. I think I credit again, a lot of the sports background, my family background. And I knew that if I started a business that no matter what, it was going to be a great experience. It was going to be a fun learning experience. And I was less concerned, I think, because of my age than I would have been had I waited. So I just jumped right in. I joke, I literally was buying these raw materials from anywhere I could find them and mixing them up and making my friends my guinea pigs. And it was a running joke because at one point when I was just getting going, I had cases of product in my basement, and I would use the phone of another business that I was working at to call out to supplement stores to try to sell them my product. And I didn't know terms. I didn't know anything about, how to get it on the shelf or if that even mattered. So I just ran and sort of went at it open-minded and was very fortunate to figure some things out quickly. And I love health and I love products. So talking about it was something that was natural for me. And that endeared me to a number of different store owners. And I was very fortunate to meet some people along the way who were established in that industry, who really just took me under their wing and said, I'm going to help you expand your business into, some of the largest stores in the country. And that was a really pivotal moment for me. So it was a really exciting, but very challenging period of time. I can remember I was one of the responsible people who got a dog right as soon as they got to college. I got a dog and used to sneak her into my dorm in a backpack. And I would be feeding myself and her McDonald's cheeseburgers with quarters because I didn't have any money, because I'd spend all the money I made anywhere else and all the money my parents gave me on product, on marketing my business, on travel to go see these store owners. And it was just the most fun I've ever had, but it was definitely the most challenging thing I've ever done.
We talk about this, a lot, where, somebody that's not like ingrained in the business, doesn't have the wisdom of, decades in the industry, starts, and we're talking about this, and you have success. I mean, because you're open-minded, you're a blank slate, learning, every nook and cranny of the industry, right? What an example of this, right, Dave? When you think about this young kid in college, really competing with titans, I'm sure, in the industry back then. I don't know who they were, and who they were, but to be, think about that, right?
Oh, I think that, frankly speaking, this is my own interpretation, but I'd like to ask you, it almost just seems like what made this possible for you is having no idea what you were doing. Because if you'd have known better, you'd have never tried it.
That's right.
Because you'd have known the odds were so stacked against you.
Yeah, you nailed it, right? Had I known better, had I had maybe other examples of entrepreneurship other than, my grandfather who'd been successful, my dad who'd been successful, I may not have had the confidence to just say, well, what's the worst that can happen? I'll try it and see. And I was just really fortunate too, that the fear that I think people develop of failure, I just didn't have that at that time. And that's, I would say, sort of been a theme for me, is just steering into those opportunities. And also, get what you don't ask for. And so I just always ask people, I'd love for you to carry my product. Will you carry my product? And I'm not going to beat around the bush or go try to find a distributor. That was always my intention.
That's great. When did you feel like you finally, were rubbing two sticks together and you got a spark? What was that moment?
Honestly, not until I had people inquiring to buy the business. I still thought I was on the verge of failing every other month, just because I had a bigger vision for where the business could go, and I wasn't getting there fast enough. So I always felt like I was behind the 8 ball, until someone reached out to me and wanted to buy the business. There were moments when I wasn't having to eat McDonald's with quarters, and I was no longer the only one driving around to stores, and I was able to hire someone that I had met who had worked in gyms and sold gym memberships, and he went out to California, and all of a sudden now we're not just in the Southeast, we're nationwide. I think that was a moment for sure where I said, "Oh, this is bigger than me." And hiring people and having employees was a weird thing when you're in your early 20s. So I think that would probably be some of the big ones, but I really didn't feel it until it came time to talk to somebody about selling the business.
Wow. And then from there, so you ended up selling it, and did you hang on to part of it?
So I thought, I would say what I would call sage advice from my grandfather. Like I said, who'd been very successful, started a software company, took that company public. And he said, if somebody wants to pay you money for your business, you should generally take the money. And at the age I was at, and what I would say where the business was, it was the right decision at that time. Now, looking back, I regret it a little bit, but I thought mistakenly that I'm just going to ride off into the sunset, go ski. I'm going to have a good time. And that lasted about a month before I was bored out of my mind and decided to jump back in. And that was when the reality hit that I did not sell the business for enough money to buy a healthy business. And so I wound up having to look for a distressed business, which was a whole other experience in and of itself. And that's a long story for sure, but it's been such a blessing to be in that distress space.
You were like 23 at this point when you sold?
24.
24. Okay, yeah. 24.
And then now this is what you do. You buy distressed businesses. Do you operate in them at all, or do you have an operator and then you go to the next one? What's your process? How do you go about that?
We actually have a really interesting approach that I would say has come out of that experience. I was fortunate when I was out in Utah. We had some really great connections with various different banks. And one of the things I never realized was that there are whole groups at these banks that are dedicated to non-performing loans, non-performing businesses, these workout groups. And going to them, it's almost like shopping in the discount section, right? And a lot of times you can find a business that's been mismanaged. So with that first one, it was all hands on deck, sleep on the floor of the manufacturing facility for 2 years, just figuring out what to do. But I loved it. I'm naturally a curious person, and the idea of getting to learn every inch of a business was really exciting, and developing a process was, I would say, a maturing experience, because I felt like I stumbled my way through my first business, and in a lot of extents, I put myself in a situation where I happened to get lucky. And then in the second business, where we were in the manufacturing space, that to me was more process driven. We were able to systematize what we did and began to branch out into other businesses. So now we have a consulting firm where we consult with distressed small to medium businesses up to about $100 million. And that helps us identify targets to either lend money to buy, and sometimes to take a majority stake in, but not buy the whole company. And usually it will be at the behest of one of our operating partners who's a consultant. Maybe they've worked in that space before, they identify a potential business, and then we make the investment, they go run it. But we have our own in-house program that we call the Rapid program, which is based on these series of milestones you really have to hit in a distressed business. And I love it. I mean, I get to wake up every day and do something a little bit different, which is a really fun thing.
That's great. How many businesses do you have in the portfolio right now?
We were up to 14, and we've recently jumped back down to 12. We sold a couple in the last few months. So the biggest one for us right now is our consulting business, but we have a number of businesses in the consumer goods space. So still staying focused on dietary supplements, personal care, and really trying to actually streamline back into that, away from we had over diversified, I would say, and streamlining back to what our bread and butter is.
Yeah. So you were in other words, you over diversified into like manufacturing and that sort of thing, where you may not have the same passions.
Yeah, we went into I would call them businesses that had similarities, right? Whether it be, ammunition manufacturing or lumber or something like that, where we felt like we had a process we could fix any business. And that was, generally the case, but it wasn't our sweet spot, right? Once we solved the core problems, we didn't really know how to grow those businesses because we didn't have that expertise. So, for me now, it's shifted from buying businesses and almost turning them around in a quick period of time, 18 to 24 months, and selling them for a really nice return, to what businesses can we build and craft into a long-lasting business.
Yeah. So is it a family? So that's what you're working right now. You have a family fund, more or less.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
So
yeah.
the business is Van Dyke Acquisitions, and I'm the executive chairman. So it gives me the purview to kind of jump in wherever I want. And I would say the thing I enjoy the most is that entrepreneurial process, the getting in and mixing it up with businesses in distress, with founders in distress, and getting to rescue those businesses and save some jobs, right? I think there's a huge opportunity and a real lack of focus on small businesses or medium-sized businesses in the US, right? So many companies focus on serving enterprises and neglect Main Street, which to me is a real shame. And that knowledge and understanding, the literacy on how to turn a business around, is just not there for small businesses and medium-sized.
It's interesting because your family office is just it sounds a little bit different than the family offices that I've interacted with. I actually had a family office as my investment banker the last time, Stevens, if you're familiar with them at all. So that was a different mentality. As a family office, they would sell to anybody. We ended up selling to HIG, which is not a family office, just regular private equity. But the family offices didn't seem as like nimble or like, you said something that made sense, family office wise, to invest in something and kind of hang on to it for a while. But when you said, you're like, turn it around in 18 to 24 months with a good investment, I was like, man, that doesn't sound anything like a traditional family office. No. It just sounds really cool. That dynamicness of what you've described, I'm sure they're out there, but this is my personal first experience with somebody that has that mentality in a family office.
Yeah, there's a few things that I would say I've picked up over the last 10 years. One, I think having all of a focus on a single business is a very admirable thing, but it just isn't for me. It doesn't fit my personality in the way that I want to build a business. I like to have that depth and breadth of experience so that I can take that and bring it back to whatever I'm doing. And I would say I'm an inch deep and a mile wide. I know a little bit about a lot of things, and that generalist mentality has served me really well. So when we think about our family office, we think about our business, we think about best practice and establishing really almost in line with what you might see with a private equity firm, but explicitly focused on businesses that we have interest in, that we think are interesting, and that also align with our what I would say our mission and our vision, which we are really focused on Christ-centered businesses. That's our goal. We may buy a business that's not a Christ-centered business, but we want to build a business that has a culture that's focused on promoting what I would say Christian values, and really focused on the U.S. now specifically. We had done some stuff internationally, had some success, but really focusing in on the U.S., focusing on small to medium businesses, and focused in on businesses that align with our values.
So when you say a Christ-centered business, how in your mind does that play out within the organization itself? Would you say that, and by the way, as a believer in myself, this is a very important part to what I do as well too, but rarely do we talk about it within the organization. We more or less kind of take that St. Francis, always be preaching, only use words when necessary approach. So you have this emulation of that. How would you say the businesses that you're looking at have a different culture because of that central mentality?
It's been a big shift for us even. I mean, to your point, for a long time, for me, it was in the background. It wasn't something that was necessarily being advertised or being influenced throughout the culture of the business. And about 3 years ago, I made this decision to have a large shift in how we do business to more of a stewardship mentality. And the drive for that was this idea that, Christ has blessed us with so much, and we have such an opportunity, and we need to be good stewards of what we've been given. And a lot of people reflect that in their personal finances and their giving. And I wanted to take it all the way through to my business because for me, there's no distinction. It's, I'm up all hours and I just can't stop. I get curious about something. I want to look at a business. I want to work on something. It invades every aspect of who I am, and I most closely associate with my business. And so I wanted my identity as a Christian to be reflected in my business. And that really has shifted the way that our employees think about the culture of the business, about what businesses we choose to invest in. We've had to pass on a number of really good opportunities because they didn't align with the values that we now have associated ourselves with, businesses we may have purchased in the past.
And that's kind of what I was asking, because I can tell, by the way that your organization itself is set up that way, and you can feel, even just speaking to you, that would permeate into the organization, the culture. But I'm talking about matching that with the companies you're buying. Like when you go to a company, what makes you say, they fit or they don't fit? You know what I mean? So, for example, I've worked with organizations where, they say, "Trust me, I'm a Christian," and I'm like, "Oh, brother, I do not." That is like, all that is like a look over here thing while you're doing that, right? So there's kind of an authentic culture of Christianity that runs through an organization, and then there are people that use that to kind of market their way disingenuously. How do you recognize like the authentic fit with what you've done so effectively that hey, you know what? These people, they are who they say they are.
I think you're asking probably the question that I've been asking for 3 years. There's no real criteria survey or as we're going through that deal sourcing and deal flow process that we sort of check those boxes. I think the first question that we always ask ourselves, and the first question I always ask myself about a business is, how does this reflect my witness? Am I buying a business that's in a space that's doing things the right way, that is not going to hinder or encumber other Christians? They're not going to, or non-believers, they're not going to look at that and say, "Oh, well, that guy claims to be a Christian, but he's got this business that's shady, that's doing the wrong things, that's processing credit cards for some thing that they shouldn't be doing." So that's probably the very first step when I look at a business to say, is this something that we can associate ourselves with? And it's going to be a positive or neutral influence on other Christians and non-believers. And then the other thing is, when we're coming in, because we're in turnarounds, we have a unique opportunity, because part of that is rapid action. And a big piece of rapid action is oftentimes a big changeover in key positions, right? The executive staff. And so we have an outsized influence on that culture immediately. We're not buying a company to necessarily partner with the founders or partner with the CEO in general. We're usually replacing them and coming in and inserting our own executive team. And all of those people are people that align with those core values of our business, those principles of our business. So I would tell you, we do scan them, but we also know that we're going to change a lot of things the second we get into the business. And it all starts again with just being a good steward of that business, and also being a good steward and a good witness with the business, as far as who we hire, as far as how we treat the people that work for us, as far as how we represent that business. And then just in general, I would say how we give from the businesses, right? That's a big component of how we do business now, is most of the profit, the dividends that are generated, flow straight into our giving. So it's not something that is a small piece of what we do. It's not a 10% thing. It's much more than that.
When you look at this, Peter, when you think about the culture change that you might have to be leading, are there core values that cantilever over all your businesses? Do they change depending on the region, the people, whatever? Are they very similar core values over all of them?
Yeah, I would tell you they're very similar across all of our businesses, right? So when you look at our businesses, there's things that are Christ-based, and there's things that are just general with the way that we do business, right? So we're a business that believes in lean. So we focus on lean principles. That isn't just like lean manufacturing. It isn't just focusing on waste reduction, but it flows through everything that we do in eliminating waste and optimizing processes, right? So that's something, we're all about sustainability. So profitability is at the heart of what we do. But then ultimately, for me, if I was to distill all of my success into one thing, it would be decision making, right? And I think our decision making framework, right, which we do have frameworks for decision making. I walk everybody through how I make decisions. That's a key piece that flows everywhere. And then when we get down to the Christian values, specifically, integrity, respect, a sense of responsibility for the business, that's a big one that I think instills an ownership mentality. I think when our staff and when our teams across all the businesses, and we don't interact with these people on a daily basis. Some of them I don't interact with even on a monthly basis. When they understand that we're not only yielding financial success for ourselves, but we're also yielding a benefit for a broader community, for children across the country. We're yielding a benefit because we're helping to stamp out human trafficking, or we're helping to promote Christian education. Those things, I think, help to align the workforce behind it. And then we measure everything. We measure charitable impact. We measure business impact. We live in an age of data, and I think, harness that power to the very maximum, right? We are very, very focused on being data-driven and focused on the empirical evidence that what we're doing is actually working. And that helps to drive that iterative process whenever we acquire a business.
So when you engage your teammates and company to company into the giving, and whether it be time, talent, investment, whatever it is, do you feel like your team gets stronger? Your team is more apt to help each other out? Do you feel that translates to business better business production, integrity, all the things that you hope? I mean, do you have a way to measure that?
Yeah, absolutely. The first thing I would look at is, when we talk about those employee engagement scores, when we were able to introduce this concept of stewardship and really take giving from something that my wife and I did to something that the business did, I think that changed employee engagement because everybody was now a part of this thing. It was something that we did behind the scenes. I'm not a very public person, generally speaking. I try to keep a low profile. I like it that way. But engaging everybody in this giving process, helping them to understand the impact of what they were doing by generating this profit, I think has been a huge shift in employee morale and employee performance. And it has substantially decreased what I would call those unfortunate HR issues that you have when you're going in and out of businesses where, is there, and a lot of times in distress, is there theft? Is there misuse of funds? Fraud, waste, and abuse, all, as anybody would say right now. It's substantially helped to reduce the instances of those things because people understand that it's not just impacting me, or it's not just impacting the executives who participate in profit sharing. It's impacting our ability to give and to be impactful in the community.
Love it.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So how would you say that okay, all things being equal, you take this culture that you have here and you compare it to, let me ask this question in a way that I think I can have you make it a little bit more articulate, okay? Because otherwise I would ask such an ambiguous question, you would be like, what are you asking me? If you were to compare the organization you have and that you turn around with the Christian values to one that had maybe the same standard of performance, but not with that Christian side. That Christian side is a little bit different. That's the side that says, I'm going to behave this way whether somebody's looking or not. That's the side that says, if I bury my talents, I know what happens here. If I invest my talents, there might be some risk, but there's a greater reward. All things being equal, how much do you think that increases performance?
That's a great question. And I think from a quantifiable perspective, I don't think it's a huge impact, right? Maybe it's a few percentage points in performance. I think the biggest impact is probably in the softer things on the human resources side. And like I said, employee engagement, but also in turnover. And then, I would say it's been a cost savings for our business. And I did not do it for this reason, but I had nurtured a culture. I was a young, much younger, much more immature when I started. And so I had and I wasn't a Christian when I started my business and the business that I'm in now either. And so when I started off, I nurtured a culture that was focused on profit sharing. How much money can we make? Optimizing that at all costs. And I would argue that the performance was great, but we would lose people because people would, go to the next best thing that's going to pay them more. So we didn't have that staying power. And then we also wound up in situations where people would cut corners, and that would drive up our legal costs. It would drive up human resources costs, and it would cause rifts because you had teams behaving in ways that, we wouldn't condone, but we also wouldn't condemn because they were performing. And I would say all of those things, this culture of stewardship, people self-selected out. Some of our top performers self-selected out and chose to just not participate because it didn't align with who they were. And that was the best thing for us. And we've now got much better retention. I'm able to take a step back because I trust the people that work for me in a way I didn't necessarily have that ability to trust them before, because we're aligned on some of those core values. Now, I'm not saying you couldn't do that in a business that's not explicitly a Christian business, but I think it has been transformative for us, given that we're a smaller, scrappy team and we work very closely together. I think that has been a game changer.
Which is pretty cool. If you go back and you're a kid now, in my opinion, you're an amazing young man. But I look back at when I was in my 20s in my business, right? Early, I started, as in my 18 years old started. But bottom line is, if I had that mentality then, boy, I would have been way more successful. And not, I believed in God. I don't think I practiced and was a student as much as I am today. But I believed in God, and I believed in giving back then. But I didn't feel like I had much to give back. But I gave back a little bit here and there. But I believe that if any young business understands the value of these two things, in my opinion, faith and participating and giving back to your community, the community that you and your team believe in giving back to, boy, I think it makes a huge difference in profitability actually. And you'd never think that. I would never thought that back then. But my experiences have really brought me to this point where there's no doubt in my mind that as I got to be more confident in talking about my faith as a leader in my businesses, I was surrounded by people that liked who I was, and I feel like they had some sense of faith themselves, and they became great teammates of mine. I believe as we developed a foundation, not as early as you did, Peter, probably not until 20 years ago that we started our foundation. And it was about giving back to the communities we served, and a percentage of our profits would go towards the foundation. It still does today. There's no doubt in my mind that the quality of our teammates are way better today from over the last 20 years, from before that time when we did not. We did that, but we didn't really. It wasn't part of our culture of where our profits would go. Right. My late wife and I, Cheryl, would just kind of give as we thought we could. Where today we give, even when we have a bad year, our foundation by itself gives back to the community on a consistent basis because it's its own animal now, right? Mm-hmm. And so I'm confident that if I would have done that back when I was 18 years old and said, you know what, I'm a $200,000 a year company, but doggone it, I'm going to have a foundation, I'm going to give back, and we're going to be a company that talks about our faith, the value of our faith to ourselves and our community, right? And if I did that back then, I'm no doubt in my mind, I'd be way more successful today than I am. I would have been over this career. So for you to figure that out as early as you have is tremendous. And tell us about that. Tell us about that amazing wife that you have, Brooke, who I've got to be friends with as well. How does that play a role when you fell into this crazy wealth by running this amazing beautiful soul of a wife that he has, right? And I think that's your biggest success, okay? And has 3 amazing kids with Brooke. And how does that play into the way you think, the way you thought then, and to mature a little faster, to drive a business faster, and have kids at a young age, and then drive the success for those kids and that spouse. Tell us a little bit about that and why that matters as well in your success.
Yeah, I would tell you, one, I think you nailed it, right? If I had run my business the way that we run it today, I would have avoided a lot of headaches. And I had to learn the hard way. I got knocked on the head pretty good a number of times because of poor decision-making, to that point of saying decision-making is everything. I made poor decisions because I put profits first. One of the best decisions I ever made was my wife and choosing to marry her. And I should say she chose to marry me. I don't know that it was I had any say in the matter because I'm so blessed to have her. You know, the idea that I didn't have to worry about this part of my life, that I had found this person who, you know, had known me before I made a dollar. And she was there when I was, like I said, eating McDonald's with quarters and driving around in my Mustang with boxes of supplements in the back. You know, she has been with me through all of that. And then, you know, the transformative component of having kids at a younger age, and the shift that that's caused, it has caused some maturing, I would say, not only in me, but in the business very quickly. Because, you know, when you're faced with, you know, let's say you're in a regulated industry like us, or even if you're dealing with, you know, selling in and out of businesses, there are a number of temptations to take corners, right? On maybe it's how you organize your taxes. You want to kind of get around certain things or set things up in a way that may be less than honest. You know, when you have kids and a wife who is a strong believer, and you know your choices also impact them, I think it's a shield and insurance in some way. And it was for me, even before I got saved, that she was keeping me on the straight and narrow path. Because it's easy to get heady and in that environment of, you know, I can do whatever I want, I can do no wrong, right? And that ego sneaks up on you and says, you know, hey, look at you, you're doing this. And she was always there to kind of keep me, I would say, in line and keep me focused. And then it's just been such a blessing to, you know, having kids, and that really lit a fire in me for, as they came to school age, for coming to Naples for Christian education and the value of Christian education, and reminded me of how important that was in my upbringing. And then also made me aware of a whole host of other things that have become really a central focus for that giving. So without them, I would be nowhere, to be fair. I mean, I would be nowhere. I might have had the success of maybe that initial business, but even then I probably would have wound up chasing girls and gotten distracted, right? So it's been such a blessing.
Absolutely, yeah. You outkicked your coverage for sure there, dude. I'll tell you. She's amazing. Okay, so when you think about you mentioned the what goes through your head when you make any decisions that you try to translate to your leaders and your team. Tell us about that, and then do some of those translate to your family as well?
Yeah, I think the decision-making process is something that I've thought a lot about, and how do I make better decisions that generate an above average, you know, risk-adjusted return in the business. And that framework that we create and we share allows the team that I have brought in to give me the right information to make an informed decision quickly. So, you know, in turnarounds and distress, it's a lot of it has to do with the pace of your decision making. So building that framework is critical. You know, for us, again, it starts with the lean principles. You know, I think that's also a very, I would say, fundamentally Christian principle of eliminating waste in a business, in your life, personally, things that are a distraction. You know, and then the other thing I always have to ask myself, because I find myself guilty of this, as I think a number of people do, is this going to encumber me? Is this going to slow me down? Or is this additive to what I'm trying to accomplish? And that has been a newer question for me as I've run myself ragged a number of times, because I'm just, like I said, I love to learn new things. I'm naturally curious, and I want to get involved with everything I hear about that sounds cool. And so I have to say, is this going to slow me down towards my ultimate goal? And my team knows those key fundamental questions that are part of our, like I said, what we call our rapid process. And they come to me with sort of the answers to those questions ahead of time, so I can make a quick decision with adequate data, because we're very data driven. And all of that also comes into the family side of things, where we also have a family sort of decision-making process. And I would say codifying that is the single biggest time saver, waste reducer that I've ever had. And that came again from my grandfather, who was an engineer and a business person, you know, and would make sort of decisions the same way every time. And so there was some predictability to it. You knew what to look for, what to ask for, and those type of things.
So are there like 3 things that go through your head in the decision making, or what? How many things in this process? How many things do you think?
So in the rapid process specifically, right? So we would talk about that is a few things, right? So we talk about it's reality check is the first step, right? So each one of those things stands for something. So really it's 5 things that we essentially look at when we think about a business, when we think about decisions, that allow us to consistently beat the odds. Now, it's not always right, but I'm also, because I love science and I'm constantly curious, I love this idea that getting a null answer, or an answer that maybe shows that whatever you thought was the case wasn't the case, is an answer in and of itself. I think that's something that's really powerful. And then also keeping a decision-making sort of almost like a journal, right? So a decision journal is something that I picked up from a book, and we keep track of all of our decisions to see how we can refine the process over time. So, it's that reality check. We call it reality check, aggressive action, precision alignment, information warfare, and then dominant repositioning, right? Like that's the rapid framework as a whole.
Okay, did you do this? Okay, so Peter is also, you started out as an amazing young entrepreneur, and really still today are. We had a conversation, I don't know, must be 2 years ago now, about what, you ask good questions. So like, what in your industry is a game changer that you think you're not able to do right now that with a partner maybe you can figure it out. And I mentioned that one thing that's been bothering me in my industry was the lack of warranties that are available in my paving industry for commercial pavements. And Peter said, okay, so I talked to him about it a couple of times, and they're like, okay, what if I built that, and I'll put together a team, we'll build that, and then we'll partner in this thing, and we'll bring it to market in front of value customers. I said, 100%. I'm not going to be doing this in the next few years for sure. So if you do that, I'd love to partner with you, because I've got all the confidence in the world. We'll build it. I'm confident I've got the customers that will buy it, and we'll make it a great business. And so sure enough, Peter went on. This is probably made the decision maybe 8 months or 10 months ago, whatever it was. And we got to meet, because he's gone way farther than I expected in a short period of time with this. Right? He didn't waste any time. And I believe it'll be a real business. I mean, warranty business in that space has not been seen before. When roofing, it's very prevalent. Paving, it's not. And pavements can last much longer than roofs if they're done right. So anyway, it's kind of a fun thing. But I love friendships with people, people like this and you, right? Because you come up with an idea, just go after it. Okay, let's do it, right? And I don't have the people at this point that could build it. And Peter, thought he did, and we will. It's going to be fun. But
so Peter, your approach to decision making, have you found?
Wait, was the answer? Did you go over those 5 principles?
Yeah.
Did you go over those 5 points with your team before you did it?
That's sort of been I would say an evolving framework that I personally didn't even create. Right, we started off with a much longer, like 15-point list of things that we wanted people to understand. Again, because I think there's so many great businesses in the US, and especially in spaces that I care about, like manufacturing, that are distressed because of maybe mismanagement, maybe a generational transfer gone wrong. And so we developed sort of I would say a checklist, framework for making decisions around those businesses, around turnarounds, around investing in those businesses. And over the years, the team has taken it on and sort of transformed it into a simplified process. And you could break out each one of those into, factors that go into, your decision making. And each one of those has a different set of factors, different set of metrics that come into it, right? So that is, and I don't take any credit there. That's all the team. They did that without my input, and it's been amazing. And now I adopt it. We use it everywhere.
Cool.
That's amazing. Have you found that you have certain operators in your organization that have adopted that quicker, and it becomes reflexive to them, like their ability to make decisions becomes incredibly rapid compared to others? Are there any traits of those people that stand out?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a differentiation between people that have, whether they've started a business or been early days at a business, and their ability to make decisions at the pace necessary for a business like ours, or in any distressed business for that matter. So I think one of the key things that I always look for is somebody who at least is a self-starter, they're entrepreneurial, whether they've been the founder themselves or just been there early days. My biggest pet peeve is when you bump across these people that are really talented, and they'll get going on something that you ask them to do, and then when they're done with that step, they'll stop and wait for you to tell them to do the next thing. And that's fine when you have, 20,000, 50,000, 100,000 employees, but that doesn't work when you have, 45 people overseeing 14 businesses, right? That are sort of the core of operational excellence. So that for me is something that I think is learned generally from being early stage, being a self-starter, maybe being a founder. So those people tend to adopt the framework much faster and start to implement it. But then also the other thing that I look for and that I value more than anything else is somebody who's failed a lot, because I have failed more times than I can count. I've been punched in the teeth a lot of times in different ways that I would never have expected. And when I see that in somebody's background, or when somebody comes to me from a business that's failed, maybe they're an executive with a company that we're acquiring, but they weren't the key decision maker. A lot of times they have an understanding of the urgency that's necessary. And they're also willing to say, okay, I'm going to take this framework, I'm going to make it my own. And maybe there's a twist, because the way that we do things is not going to work for every company, right? And it's not going to work for every founder. It's not going to work for every CEO, whatever it is. But there's a twist on there. There's truth in that, and they can take it and make it their own. So usually those two things are the first thing I look for. And then I think the other thing is that I love people that understand what the upside is, and they are quickly doing the back of the napkin math to say, oh, if I can take this out, take this out, take this out, replace this, and they're very rational about it. They can see the path to the finish line. Now, all of a sudden, they're willing to, run through brick walls, right? I mean, the amount of cost savings we've found in the last 2 years from being first mover and getting some things wrong on things like, AI contact centers, replacing an entire floor of people, 200 people in a BPO, right, doing calls for healthcare providers with, now 20 agents and an AI calling service. That has been a huge boon in profitability for that business, but it's also made us substantially better. If we had waited and we didn't have those first movers, those aggressive people, we never would have captured that value. And it's a limited time offer, right? That's the other thing I always tell people. It's like, we have a limited window to gain an outsized advantage before this is table stakes and everybody does it. So let's gain the advantage while we can, and let's move fast. And that requires more of an entrepreneurial mindset for sure.
Yeah, AI is interesting that way. It's like, it's really not even a strategic advantage because everyone has access to it now. It's more or less, it's like saying, yeah, our company has cars. It's like, well, that's a strategic advantage only if people choose not to use them. But, that's great. So I guess, one of the questions that I have is, when you think about beginning with the end in mind, now we all have our own personal end, but we also have a company's end, and we have, who's next, what's next. So for me, like, I wanted to make myself as irrelevant as I could in my organization as quickly as I could, and then to move away from CEO so somebody else could become CEO and they could take that part. And I kind of would look at it as though the mark of my success would be that when somebody's in a meeting and somebody said, well, Dave would have done this, and they go, Dave who? That would be like kind of the mark of that success. Not everybody thinks that way, by the way. But what is it for you when you think about, like, beginning with the end in mind for the organization? You see the vision of the organization. What does that look like, and how far out are you seeing this?
For me, like I said, a big shift 3 years ago with this idea of stewardship and building an organization that was focused on Christian values. And that was mainly because I did not want to be involved in the day-to-day of running the business anymore, right? I was a CEO at that point. It wasn't what I enjoyed doing for a business that's sort of dabbling in 14 different things, or whatever the number is at any given point. What I really like to do is jump in and fix problems. And, like I said, my early passion remains my passion: health, wellness. That area is what I really care about. And I love people and interact with people. So I saw this need several years ago to take myself out of your business, just like you're describing. I just saw that as the ultimate end goal, to create this perpetual machine that would give to the things that I cared about, but that I didn't need to be there for, and I didn't need to be a part of. And quite frankly, that, whether or not I generated a substantial amount of money from it was largely irrelevant, because my fulfillment was coming from somewhere else at this point. So that's where we are today. I mean, I don't I get involved with what I choose to get involved with, but my focus is on, the impact that we can make at this point. And my focus is on jumping in and mixing it up with specific businesses, whether we are an investor, an owner, whether we're a consultant, or whether it's none of the above. And it's just a business that I find interesting and they've asked me to come help. That's really where I see myself going. And a lot of that is driven by the shortness of time. My sort of realization, we're so limited in the amount of time that we have and the impact that we can make. And I'm 36, I'm still young, but at the same time, I don't want to spend the next 40 years, 200 days a year on the road, flying all over the country to go see different businesses. That's not how I want to spend my kids' time growing up. And that's, I think, limiting my impact and my vision for myself. So for me, that change in my business is I want those businesses to be building something that's a legacy that's going to last, but it's not a legacy for me per se. It's a legacy in the giving that they're going to do. And ultimately, it will continue in perpetuity, with or without me, with or without my kids involved. Whatever happens, it'll just continue to operate on. And I want to help, small businesses, medium-sized businesses in the US with transformations, with turnarounds. And I want to talk to people about, how to get healthy, how to take care of themselves. And I want to talk to people about stopping child trafficking and CSAM. And I want to talk to people about Christian education for kids. Those are the things that I care about.
I can see you coming back when you're 90 years old and you're in your rocker or your whatever, your
walker.
Maybe you won't even need a walker because of the health and fitness side of things. But showing up one day to this great organization that you founded and you started, and recognizing its soul, but having it be so big that you need to be shown around like it's brand new. I think that's the pace that you're on right now, and it's pretty cool.
Well, I think about what I see, Peter. The difference you're making in education right now, and they do some amazing things. The school in Naples is one of the best I've ever seen or heard of. That Brooke and Peter really, amongst a few others, have really led this charge of this amazing Christian school. And then your commitment to schools across Florida to do the same thing at churches, right? Build schools at churches across Florida. I mean, I've never heard or seen anyone at their age, to make a difference as big as they've made already, with a vision way bigger, right? Mm. So, Peter, just mention a couple things. You don't like to talk about the stuff that you're doing, I know, too much, but just a quick little history of that.
I was really blessed. My parents, like I said, strong Christians, and they sent me to a small Christian school in Atlanta called the High School School. It's no longer around, unfortunately. That really laid the foundation for my life, right? I spent time on Sundays at church, and I spent time throughout the week at this Christian school. I would say it taught me how to think, but it gave me a filter. And one of the things I'm so concerned about is, a lot of these private institutions in the US, private schools that are great academically, have removed the Christian values, the Christian component of what they do. The school that I went to high school in Atlanta is one of those places where that's no longer part of who they are. And it removes that, I would say, that conscience, that teaching for those kids at such an important age to learn how to say, oh yeah, that's not true, or oh yeah, that doesn't align with my principles, or oh yeah, that's not going to make me happy, right? That's not going to give me a fulfilling life. That's not going to make a positive impact. And so when I look at the landscape, and Brooke and I look at the landscape, we just thought that, I always come back to my favorite Bible verse, Romans 8:28, right? We know that in all things, God works for the good of those who love him and who've been called according to his purpose. And when I think about education, I think, we could argue all day, we could talk all day about the value of higher education, but I do believe that Christian education is critical, and that every child has been called with a purpose. And so our mission is to ensure that that purpose is nurtured through Christ-centered learning environments. So we try to partner strategically with churches, with schools, with other faith-driven educators, whether they're private, a homeschool, whatever it is, to deliver scalable, Christ-aligned solutions that advance those children's academic excellence, their spiritual formation. And for me, I see a lot of places that are focused on curriculum, right? And I think that's a key component of it. But what I see, I don't have any unique value to give in the curriculum space. I don't know anything about it. I've never been a teacher, and neither has my wife. So for me, where I see is the resources that we can provide, the education that we can provide from how do you run this profitably, giving you the platforms and the technology to do so for free, and developing technology where it's necessary for free, whether that be to take donations, whether that be to engage with parents, whether that be to give children what they need to see biblical impacts throughout all their lessons, right? We want to give the technology and I would say the curriculum necessary. And then also making sure that whatever we do, we partner with the church, right? And, for me, I think that's a key component. Our kids are in a great school. It's a covenant school. They've made a point of that, right? So, I believe that there are great schools that are a witness, and there are other schools that are meant to bring your kids up for Christian families, Christian parents. And I think both of those have value, and we want to support both of those, but they're also unique in their needs. So recognizing that, giving them the technology, giving them support, supporting them monetarily, all of those things are something that I believe is critical, because without that, I wouldn't be where I am. I know that. And I wouldn't be where I am today. I wouldn't be in business today. None of this would be possible if it wasn't God's plan for my life, and if it wasn't because of that education that I had, that foundation, that when I got kicked down in my business, and I got kicked down hard in my business, and it made me question everything, that I turned to the Lord, and that was because of my parents and that education that I got. So I credit that with everything. And I think giving other kids that opportunity in a world where that's going away quicker than we can replace it, is just a small thing that we can do to give back. So we love that one. That's a big one for us. And then there's a few other things that we love and we care about as well. And I mentioned some of those, like combating, CSAM and trying to shut down the purveyors of that. And then also, again, supporting birth mothers, women who've given children up for adoption, is a big one that's near and dear to us, because we think that's a sort of a really neglected area.
So he's not done a lot, for 36 years old. He should have done a lot more in his life. By now,
if you went to said your age and we just went through your resume, I'd be like, wow, when are you going to retire? You're like 85. That's pretty amazing.
No, he's
progress. All of this is still in progress. And I think that's the best thing about it, right? We're working towards something. We have an end in mind, and we're trying to build something. And I pray we get there. We may get there. But it's just been such a blessing to be born in the U.S., to be born with, with the opportunities that we have. I want to ensure those opportunities for my kids and for their kids. And so I think it's just, I feel blessed to have the family that I have, to have these examples that I've had, whether it be my parents, my grandparents, other mentors in my life, getting to meet people like Gary, who kind of give me an idea of, I should be like that. I should keep doing what I'm doing. And maybe one day I'll be like Gary when I grow up. That's sort of where I just feel so fortunate.
Peter, what I see in you, and I love about you, and great entrepreneurs can be great entrepreneurs in business, but not often, not always, and I would say not often enough, do they use those entrepreneur skills to do great things philanthropically? Because really, as an entrepreneur, the same skills you use to build those businesses, right? The same principles you can use in your philanthropic cause. And if you do that, I mean, they raise money with no problem, because they know how to sell. They operate those nonprofits without a problem, because they understand operations. They understand how to be lean, right? And people will invest in nonprofits if they see that they're lean. They're good stewards of the investment, right? So you're doing that, and I think that's the coolest thing when great entrepreneurial minds and great business minds go outside that and use those same skills to do amazing things philanthropically. So it's really neat. And, I'm getting married in July, and you better be there, okay? But in July, I've got a guy, so I'm Catholic. And as you know, Catholics in the Catholic faith need an annulment. And my fiance could not get an annulment any reasonable time. And so we've said we're going to get it after, right? Which, isn't perfect in perfect line with my faith, right? In the church, but we're doing that. But a buddy of mine is going to marry us, and his name is Yaku Boyens. he's a champion in the fight against human trafficking. So we're involved. I've been involved with Yaku since I've known him probably 7-8 years ago now. But this guy is just a champion. I want you two to meet him because he's incredible. But he needs entrepreneurs like us. He's not really an entrepreneur. I mean, he's a warrior. He's smart as can be. He understands this fight. But he's really not an entrepreneur. He needs entrepreneurs around him to build this organization to make the biggest difference, because there's never been a bigger time than now, in my opinion, that we need to fight this crazy thing. So again, back to the entrepreneurial minds that we all have some strength in. We need to use those to the highest standard we can to fight for good causes like this. So I really appreciate what you do, and I know that there's a lot more that you do than that you don't even talk about, because you got to dig this stuff out of him. Okay,
yeah.
He's just not as he's not as overconfident as I am. Okay, he's not overconfident. I'm overconfident. I'll talk about everything. He's a little bit more reserved.
You got to draw it out. I can tell.
He's got the opposite of a pride thing, right? I get this pride thing that I got to battle with. This guy has none of that. So
you and me both, man. Yeah, it's been great. Absolutely fantastic. I'm very much looking forward to getting a chance to meet you face to face here, and I'm grateful that we have
you guys are 25, 30 minutes away, so you got to meet. And Peter, you got to see this place, buddy. It makes me look bad for this podcast I'm doing. I do it anywhere I'm sitting for that time, whether it's sometimes on the toilet, maybe. I mean, wherever it is, I do it from wherever, right? And Chris is bothered by that over the course of time, and he keeps saying, you got to get something more professional. You come here, you're like, oh my God, I've not really done the best I can do. We could play pickle up here. We could shoot hoops in the back. He's got a stadium around us. You could have 50, 60 people. Here to that when we listen to somebody like Dave, we can sit up there in the crowd.
In fact, we could host a nonprofit fundraiser for you right here if you'd want to.
This would be a good one for sure.
I am in awe, honestly. I mean, one of the things I feel so blessed, like I said, is to get to interact with people like the two of you. I mean, it's one of the greatest joys of being an entrepreneur, even being mildly successful as an entrepreneur, is that the people that you meet, the things that they're trying to accomplish, it just opens your mind to what's possible, right? If you've got something to say, right? Imagine that, having an auditorium where you could do a podcast. Who would have thought, right? I mean,
imagine how bad it is if you have nothing to say and you still have it.
Podcast or talking to anybody about any of this, right? And it's amazing where that journey takes you. And I'd say, again, only in America, right, does that happen. So it's such a blessing. And honestly, I feel like I've got so much left to learn. So I listened to the podcasts, and I'm just amazed at the value of the knowledge, right? As a curious person, as somebody that loves to learn, what a service you guys are doing just in general for people that are just getting started. The lessons that they can avoid, the hard knocks that they can avoid by sucking in that education is critical. And you just don't get it in college. You don't get it in an MBA program, right? And you have to, you really go looking for it from people that have done it, which is, I think, such a service. It's such an amazing thing. So to me, that's like the best gift that you can give somebody.
It's a lot of fun. And again, I continually, selfishly, I continue to learn off of everybody like you two, right? That I'm in front of. And so, I got a lot to learn. I've started, with very little in this hillbilly mind of mine, and it's still very little, but it's growing. It's growing because of people like you guys. So
it's pretty amazing, by the way. And you get to be like, I'm not going to say our age when I'm around Gary because he's so much older. It made me feel old. But when you get to be our age and you've got somebody that's almost my son's age on there, and you're like, I got to have this guy on my show because I'm going to learn so much from him. It's pretty amazing.
Absolutely.
Pretty awesome.
Awesome.
Well, thanks so much.
Peter, you're awesome, baby. Thanks for being on. I really appreciate you being here with us today. And we're both going to take advantage of this because you're going to use this for your podcast too, right?
Yeah, well, I'm going to try to get him there in person.
His podcast, which it's got way more hits than mine, but I don't think quite as good as mine. He's got the scenery for sure, and
that's why I have it, Gary.
He's got the creature comforts.
Because I was just saying, that's why I have all this, so you don't have to pay attention to the host anymore. You just look around. All right, that was great.
Hey,
thanks so much,
Peter. Well, love you, man. Thank you so
All
much
right.
for being on today. And you know what? Another amazing story, an amazing entrepreneur, and just a world-class all-star that we have here. And to be on with you to really drive this and drive all this out of my buddy has been a pleasure. So thank you
Pleasure's
so much.
mine. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thanks.
All right, travel safe.
Until next time. Thanks a lot. See ya.